Good morning. My name's Paul Welburn, and this is Faith Baptist Church Sunday School. It is cold outside. It's another snowstorm, another weekend. This is the third weekend in a row we've had snow. My trusty coffee with me out here, and it is blustery. So if you hear noises or the camera moves, which it's just about to move right now, it is pretty windy right now. So I think it's 26 degrees, probably with a wind chill of something very cool. So last week we looked at Joseph, and we studied his life as a teenager, 17 years old, and how he and his brothers basically had a dysfunctional relationship. And his dad, Jacob, who was also known as Israel, gave him gifts and things, one of which was a robe of several colors. That was just a sign that the brothers were like, yeah, he is the favorite, and we just can't stand him. So they got him, threw him into a pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites, and he basically was taken away to Egypt, and that's where we pick up the story today. But and if you've grown up in church like me, I mean, you could basically recite this from memory without having to look at the book of Genesis. But we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 39, and Joseph, he flourished in Egypt, but he had a rough start, and ultimately God gave him blessings for his stance and what he did in Egypt, and how he had favor. And favor is interesting in the Bible whenever you see people that have favor. But he looked at the situation as kind of like, okay, God, I'm here in Egypt, I'm 17 years old, and I'm now under the rule of a guy named Potiphar. And so whenever he got to Potiphar's house, Potiphar said, this guy he's smart, he has a great temperament, and I think I'm going to put him in charge of several things here at the house. I trust him. And so Joseph built that trust, and that was part of Joseph's character that you'll see throughout his life. People trusted him, even if he wasn't part of the Egyptian culture, even with him standing for God in a pagan culture, whenever things are just all mixed up. So let's pick it up, Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 through 7. Now Joseph had been taken to Egypt. An Egyptian named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, and the captain of the guards, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, serving in the household of this Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made everything he did successful, in other words, Potiphar recognized his favor that he had. And Potiphar was pagan. It wasn't like he was like, oh, God's blessings has given him just all these things. I trust in God. No, he saw Joseph was successful, really. And so Joseph found favor with his master and became his personal attendant. Potiphar also put him in charge of his household and placed all that he owned under his authority. From that time, he put him in charge, and the Lord blessed him and the Egyptian's household because of Joseph. The Egyptian's household was blessed because of Joseph. The Lord's blessings was on all that he owned in his house and in his fields, and he left all that he owned under Joseph's authority. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built, handsome, and after some time his master's wife looked longingly at Joseph and said, sleep with me. So, keeping things PG, sleep with me, you can kind of figure out what that means. Egyptian wives, Egyptian women back then were very attractive. I mean, you have Cleopatra as an example. But they ordained themselves, a lot of makeup and things like that. And so she was probably pretty attractive. We don't think that she was necessarily like really old or older. We don't know how old Potiphar was, and he may have had a younger wife. So she may have not been that much difference from Joseph. At this point, he was maybe 18 or 19 or maybe even 20. And so she may have been in her 20s as well. So it's not like you kind of get this image whenever you've heard the story of this older woman and this really young guy and that sort of thing. So there may have not been that much age difference. Also, the Egyptian culture was pretty much open as far as relationships. And so it wasn't really that unheard of to have relationships like this. Again, keeping it PG. But Joseph, coming from his culture and knowing that basically she was Potiphar's wife, had problems with it. And so you'll see in the next verse that he basically put her off. And so this is an example of temptation, and that's really the point of the lesson is part of its temptation. But we tend to think of temptation as a sexual sin, but it can be all kinds of temptations. I know of a professor that uses a software that his students, if they copy and paste, in other words, plagiarize their work, and they submit their work, this software can filter through it and show a percentage immediately of how much of that work was plagiarized. And so students are tempted to just, okay, the easy route, copy, paste, submit. In the past, unless you had a really savvy professor, they might not know, and it gets past the professor. Now with software, and there's all kinds of software out there like this, but this software in particular, it's really quick. And so the temptation to plagiarize is kind of subverted because the students know, okay, we might get caught pretty quickly. And so that's one of the things with temptation, when people, kind of a deterrent, is that fear factor of, okay, I might get caught. And we think about a professor catching or whatever. So let's continue to look here at Genesis chapter 39, verses 8 through 10. But he refused. Look, he said to his master's wife, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. He has put all that he owns under my authority. No one in this house is greater than I am, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do this immense evil? How could I sin against God? Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her. In other words, sleep with her. So you have Joseph saying, look, I've been trusted over this household, and basically anything is mine except for you. And even though the culture kind of accepted it, Potiphar may have been, and Joseph might have picked up on some things, some tension at the dinner table with Potiphar noticing his wife was staring at Joseph and that sort of thing. And so Joseph obviously was like, look, you're the one thing that he said is off limits. And more importantly for Joseph, he did not want to sin against God. And that's the main point of this through the lesson, and that'll be at the very end here in just a sec. So Genesis 39, verses 11 through 12. Now one day he went into the house to do his work, and none of the household servants were there. Dun, dun, dun. She grabbed him by the garment and said, sleep with me. But leaving his garment in her hand, he escaped and ran out. He wasn't naked. He had layers of clothing. And so she grabbed the outer garment and took it from him. And so, we'll pick up next week what happened and how Joseph basically handled these situations, because he kept putting her off and saying, no, this is not right. And it's not, and really in the Egyptian culture too, it could have gained him some power to have this relationship. I know it sounds kind of funny, but again, the Egyptian relationship was pretty pagan and very different. And so to have these strategic relationships, it could have meant something, even if it would have made Potiphar upset, his wife, that sort of thing. So Joseph had made the decision to say, no, I'm not going to do this. Now, we tend to think of things, and in the big, we tend to say, okay, this lesson is about temptation. And so when you find yourself in temptation, God's going to provide an escape route. And that's true. That's biblical. That's New Testament. But I love this quote by Martin Luther. You cannot keep the birds from flying in the air over your head, but you can prevent them from building a nest in your hair. Part of preventing birds from building a nest in your hair is having just diligence and being aware of what's happening around you, and just being thoughtful and mindful about your life. And part of that is a relationship with Jesus Christ. Ultimately, Joseph, it wasn't like he had this really strong way of saying no to things that were tempting, or that could be tempting or whatever. It was that he had a constant relationship with God. And remember, this is Old Testament. This is prior to Jesus Christ in flesh. But he had that relationship with God that daily he knew to what was right, what to keep his mind focused on. And for us as believers, having that daily relationship with Christ, praying whenever you drive, not just whenever you eat, but whenever you drive, whenever you're walking around, whenever you have a situation, but multiple times a day, just quick prayers, having that relationship with Christ, thinking Christ-like thoughts. Music is a big thing too. I know Christian music, there's several radio stations out there that you can listen to that again, keep your mind on things of Christ. Of course, Bible reading, if you can find time to read Scripture, whether it's a small pamphlet from Charles Stanley in the mornings, or if it's opening up your big heavy Bible and doing a few verses. But that's one of the keys to whenever you face temptations in life, no matter if it's like a Potiphar's wife situation, or if it's grades, or if it's insider trading with the stock market, whatever, having your mind set on Christ, what the outcome will be as far as your thoughts and actions. And right from wrong. And so it will help give you that strength to make those right decisions. Thanks, everybody. Keep warm, and we'll see you next week.